It is very frustrating when you spend all your time praying in tongues, hoping for change but barely seeing any. If praying in tongues is powerful, why is it not working for me? You ask yourself. This is a position I have found myself in some time back, but good for me, I quickly figured out what was happening. Today, I'll explain what I learned in case you are in a similar position with the same question. First, let's set the record straight. Praying in tongues is very powerful. No doubt about it. Praying in tongues is a gift of the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit has the full power of God. This means that by praying in tongues, you tap into the full power of God. And as we know it, nothing is impossible with God. But let's be very honest here. It is not a surprise to hear of believers who pray in tongues but see no change in their lives. So, what is going on in the spiritual realm when a believer prays in tongues but sees no change? Well, to understand, you need to consider two main things. One, how praying in tongues works. Two, the responsibility of a believer in praying in tongues. Anytime someone prays in tongues and sees no change, the problem lies in the two factors I have just mentioned. I'll explain. Praying in tongues is the highest level of prayer available to human beings. When human beings sinned against God, He hid Himself from our sin, as Isaiah chapter 59 verse 1 and 2 tells us. God choosing to hide from our sin was an act of mercy. Had God not distanced Himself from us, He would be forced to give us the punishment of sin, which we know from the book of Romans chapter 6 verse 23 is death. To prevent the instant death of all people, God distanced Himself and introduced prayer. The good thing with prayer is that it enables a sinful man to speak to a holy God without the risk of death. God has put in place mechanisms to filter prayers before they get to Him. These mechanisms ensure the safety of human beings when we make foolish prayers and when we are defiled. The book of Leviticus gives us a glimpse of those mechanisms. However, the very mechanisms put in place to ensure our safety also make prayer very complex. The laws governing how we approach God in prayer are just too many and too complex for us to keep. When God saw that it was difficult for people to keep those laws and commune with Him, He came up with a very wise idea. He introduced the gift of praying in tongues through the Holy Spirit. In simple terms, when you pray in tongues, the Holy Spirit takes care of the many complexities governing prayer so that you have an easy time speaking with God. Think of it like driving an automatic car. You may never understand how stepping on the accelerator makes the wheels turn, but it happens. The car takes care of the flow of fuel, changing gears, and all other complex engine functions for you to have a simple driving experience. Despite all that, there is an important point I want you to remember. At the end of the day, with all the simplification, you still have to step on the accelerator for the car to move. Also, you have to put fuel in your car for you to drive. Don't forget that steering the car is also still the responsibility of the driver. This brings me to the second part of praying in tongues that you need to understand: the responsibility of the believer. Praying in tongues, just like an automatic car doing the heavy lifting for you, is easy until when the car breaks down. When the car breaks down, all of a sudden, you have to understand the complexities of how the car works for you to have a chance of fixing it. Likewise, when you pray in tongues and don't see results, it is time for you to dive into the complexities of the laws of God governing prayer for you to understand why the tongues that you are speaking are ineffective. As much as the Holy Spirit takes care of praying in tongues, time comes when you as a believer have to understand the laws that govern prayer. By default, it is the responsibility of the believer to do the praying in tongues and to implement any instructions that the Lord recommends. The Holy Spirit by default will supply the power required to deliver results and the guidance required to navigate the laws of God. Because praying in tongues is a partnership, it is not immune to misunderstandings. The Holy Spirit by nature is very gentle, which is a good thing, but that also means it is very easy to ignore Him. For many believers, their partnership with the Holy Spirit breaks down because of two main reasons. One, they don't understand important prayer laws that the Holy Spirit wants them to understand. Two, they don't take actions that the Holy Spirit recommends. When this partnership breaks down, the Holy Spirit withholds His power and goes silent on giving any further guidance from the Lord. As a result, the believer will be praying in tongues, but the tongues have no power of the Holy Spirit, and the believer has no guidance from the Holy Spirit. This will continue until the day the believer notices there is something wrong. It is only when the believer humbles himself and asks the Holy Spirit why praying in tongues is not delivering the results it should be delivering that the Holy Spirit will respond. When he responds, he will begin by revealing the prayer laws that the believer ignored. Then he will recommend an action for the believer to take. If the believer listens and takes the recommended action, the Holy Spirit responds by giving his power and providing further direction. As a result, the tongues of the believer will start producing results again. Therefore, if you have been praying in tongues but they don't feel powerful, it is time to humble yourself and ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you what prayer laws you have ignored and what action you failed to take. Trust me, He will reveal them to you in the most gentle way possible. If you accept them and do as He guides you, praying in tongues will become powerful again and deliver results for you. God bless you.